Culture.
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 Drawn and Quarterly is hosting Cliff Nesteroff on one of the stops of his book launch for his book, The Comedians, the history of 20th century comedians.
I've been a fan of Cliff's for as long as I've known him. When I met him, he was known as Shecky Gray, Vancouver's infamous cymbal-smashing insult comic.
Drawn and Quarterly, they focus on graphic novels, but they're constantly having events, they're constantly bringing in authors.
A tremendous book, necessary for any comedy fan. Also with us tonight is comedian David Hetty. We're also very happy to have him here tonight.
Yes. David, Cliff, thanks for coming, everybody. Let's remove these stand-up mics. I was at the Comedy Central party and I was carrying around a copy of my book like an idiot, hoping people would recognize the jacket flaps or something. And Todd Barry was there, and I said, Todd, I wanted to give you a copy of my book. Todd Barry's a stand-up comic, very funny. And I said, I want to give you a copy of my book, and he goes, oh, am I in it? And I went, no. And he was like, oh. And then there was no more conversation. A lot of the people that are fans of this book so far are my heroes. So Mel Brooks gave me a blurb for the back of the book. Albert Brooks invited me to his house. Steve Martin sent me the nicest email ever, and then sent me like a flurry of emails asking questions about old comedians. I was like, Steve, please, enough.
Drawn and Quarterly was pretty successful right from the beginning.
I wondered, like you said, it's a comedy boom right now.
Yes.
And everybody was like, that's the publisher to watch out for. We were initially looking for a space for the office, and then we just ended up creating a store and filling it with stuff that we were interested in besides comics. Right away, like we built a stage in the bookstore because we wanted to have regular readings.
So eventually this comedy boom will bust, and then you and I will be doing much smaller bookstores than this.
We've been sleeping the past couple weeks. So.
It's been established enough now that it is just one of those places you go.
Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Chris Oliveros was the founder of Drawn and Quarterly 25 years ago. He wanted to create a comics magazine that would be on the newsstands and would bring the kind of comics he thought were interesting to a wider audience. Comics at that time, maybe not so differently than it is now, is dominated by superheroes, but there was an underground alternative comics movement as well, and graphic novels had not been established. Mouse had come out, so there was sort of the great literary graphic novel. It was something that a lot of us were waiting for. But at the time, there was not much out there. There was Raw magazine, which was Art Spiegelman and Francois Mouly's magazine that Mouse was serialized in. There was Fantagraphics, and they were the sort of the big alternative comics publisher. But there was room for others, and so Drawn and Quarterly did establish itself, kind of very quickly. Canada has a very strong cartooning community. Chris saw the comics of Julie Doucet, and she's a Montreal cartoonist. It just kind of, snowballed. He just then signed Seth, cartoonist from Toronto, and had been kind of going after Chester Brown for a while. So he finally brought Chester into the fold. And when Mouse came out, there were a number of cartoonists like Seth and Chester who said to themselves, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to make books like that. This is my chance. So for like the alternative comics crowd, it's where we were headed. It's what we wanted.
We're celebrating the Drawn and Quarterly edition of Craig's modern classic graphic novel, Blankets. And
thank you.
We're very honored. And
So
really,
am I. Thank you for being here. And
So by the time Craig starts working on Blankets, it was just a given that you could just make, a long personal work.
Blankets, it's a coming-of-age story about growing up in rural Wisconsin. I was resisting what I was seeing in mainstream comics, which was these explosive power fantasies with superheroes and sci-fi, whatever. And I wanted instead to have this big, huge book where barely anything happens. It's just small scale, human, quiet, intimate. The sort of stage could be as big as just a bed for several pages. Comics coming in the newspaper, the Sunday Funnies, was like our first visual medium. We didn't have a TV until I was like 6. I realized like, oh, comics is a great mode for self-expression. It just takes a pencil and a paper and one person can create their visions. So I was taking, you know, like my real life stories and sort of converting them to this cartoony form. I think everybody's childhood is traumatic. And in telling your own story, you give other people the permission to feel and express their stories. I really wanted to create comics that had a sort of the emotional resonance of a good song. Why aren't comics like music in terms of how you're moved emotionally while reading them? So that was something I was aiming for. I thought that should be a purpose of comics. Blankets is published first in 2003. It was very surprising. It was an instantaneous hit. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I think it was part of a sea change that was happening in comics. It was unique. There wasn't people putting out 600-page books that were not serialized in some form. After that was when big publishers started, you know, seeking out cartoonists to make long-form comic books.
Bye.
Merci. Merci.
I read it in one night.
Really?
I was like non-stop. Wow, it was like maybe the greatest comic book night ever. Yeah, I really.
As there were more comics telling personal stories.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
You're the best.
And less just being superhero oriented. More women found things that they were interested in comics, and just found, you know, more women making comics, and that just kind of grew. We were always interested in what stories women were telling.
Drawing, it's a way to express something that sometimes you don't have words for. What I like in graphic novel is that, like compared to comics, it's more free. We can do whatever into the page, whatever we want.
Julie, elle a un autre livre aussi qui s'appelle Everywhere Antenna. Je suis Daphné, je travaille à la librairie John & Quarterly. J'ai choisi ce journal. Julie travaille ici à la librairie. And she also considers herself as an author, which is really important, and in this book you can see the author voice emerge.
We're Drawn and Quarterly, you know, we have this bookstore that's becoming a destination bookstore. We should be leading on talking about and promoting graphic novels. So we created the Graphic Novel Book Club, you know, with that in mind, to seriously talk about comics the way people had been talking about novels for hundreds of years.
Do you want to say something quickly about like how you found the book, or?
I feel like Drawn & Quarterly would not give up easily on an author. Like when they start to publish someone, normally they keep on publishing this person.
The most important thing for us has always been, you know, to publish the comics that the cartoonists wanted to make.
They support the art of the person. I always had the last choice on the art, on the cover.
There is very little and oftentimes no editorial interference with what people give us.
They are at your service, can you say that in English? Like they are here to help you giving birth to of your book.
If it sells well and, you know, everybody can make a living out of it, that's great. But the foremost thing to us is getting people to make the art that they want to make.
The story goes that Craig was looking for a new publisher for Blankets, and he had started shopping it around, and he thought sort of at the last minute, oh, I guess I should try Drawn & Quarterly.
That's not the story, no. Drawn & Quarterly is the greatest comics publisher in North America, so I'm super honored to be published by them now. And I don't think I would have dreamed that this would have happened earlier. Thank you big time to D&Q for doing the new edition of Blankets, because I definitely feel connected on a personal level with the people at Drawn & Quarterly. And I've never had that before in my career. It's like I finally found my tribe in comics.
We're an artist-first company. I know that's a big part of our success. We don't lose sight of that's why we're doing it. We're considered one of the great comics publishers in the world right now. That it's, you know, such a beloved comics publisher is, you know, it's amazing.
Thank you so much.